let's play this Meta Goblin video. Top 10 good things coming in TBC. This is the video. Everyone get your snackies. It's snack time. Okay? Alright. Ooh.
Alright guys, and welcome to another video. Today I'm going to be counting down the top 10 improvements that were added in the Burning Crusade expansion. So just before we jump in, it's important to note that you really shouldn't take this video too seriously. At the end of the day, I'm just having a little bit of fun.
Okay.
I understand how people have very different opinions in the World of Warcraft audience, and how people may think that these changes that I'm going to talk about weren't improvements and actually had a negative effect on the game. Nonetheless, This is just my humble, harmless opinion, and I am a little bit on the fence when it comes to a few of these points. But anyway, just before jumping, please give me a quick follow on Twitch if you want to catch any of my live streams. And anyway, let's jump into the video. So my first point is expanded class design. A lot of people have described the Burning Crusade as an expansion that very simply just built on Classic WoW's core game design by adding more core abilities, DPS abilities, fun abilities, more talents, and just overall increased depth, immersion, and fun playstyle for each and every single class. Abilities that I can think of from the top of my head will be stuff like...
Kind of the way it is, like everything in Vanilla WoW you wish you had, TBC kind of delivers it as far as each of the specs go. Like TBC is a really great successor to Classic. That is true.
Seed of Corruption. The only real strong AoE class in Classic was the Mage, obviously, with Frost Nova and Blizzard and other things like that. But obviously Seed of Corruption was essentially a ticking time bomb explosive AoE ability, which was very fun to use. Warlocks also had Unstable Affliction, which was just another simple, very interesting ability to add to the rotation. Paladins got Crusader Strike, so they no longer just had to pop a seal and then pop Judgment and then auto attack the whole time. They had one extra button to press, which was quite nice. Shadow Priest.
Here's the thing, dude, about Crusader Strike. Listen, what's gonna happen, I guarantee, a lot of Paladins are like, oh dude, Poggy's Crusader Strike, I have a button to press now. They're gonna play it. They're gonna try TBC. They're gonna use Crusader Strike. The rotation's gonna be too complex. They're gonna go back to Classic. I guarantee you, dude. Crusader Strike rotation will be too complex. They're gonna have to go back to auto attacking.
It's got Vampiric Touch. It also had really cool things like Shadow Step for the Rogue, which would teleport the Rogue behind a target, which was very useful and very fun. Mages had Invisibility. They also had Spell Steal, which could steal other buffs. It could steal temporary shields, like even, you know, another Mage's Mana Shield, which was pretty cool. Druids got a really strong CC ability called Cyclone, although it's probably one of the most hated abilities in the game, especially for warriors. And Healing Druids also got Tree Form, which allowed them to feel actually more like a druid because they could actually do a little bit shape-shifting, rather than that being exclusively reserved for Feral and Moonkin and for tank. There's also a number of abilities that just kind of fixed issues. We could describe them as issues or just irritating, nitpicky things for each and every class. For instance, Cloak of Shadows, which is really useful for rogues. It basically reduced all debuffs that you had on yourself, which meant that you could pop that and then pop into a Vanish. Because obviously, if you vanished when you have a dot on you, it would break the Vanish, which was a little bit irritating. There's also abilities like Ritual of Refreshment, which basically summoned a table that people could click, and when people clicked it, it gave them food rather than mages having to individually trade food with each and every single raid member.
This is very nice.
There's also a similar ability given to Warlocks to allow them to very quickly hand out health stones to every single raid member. Yes. Overall, I just think that the classes simply had more content for every player to have a mess around with. Second point I'm going to make is more raid mechanics. So it's no question that World of Warcraft's raiding has increased in sophistication and complexity as each and every expansion has been released. To illustrate this in the best way, I've decided to compare the Flamelash fight in Blackwing Lair.
Listen, this is my opinion as a Classic Andy. You guys might say I'm too fucking stupid or whatever. Okay? I look at some of the bosses in Shadowlands, in like Mythic Castle Nathria, and I look at it and I'm like, this is so creative, it's almost too creative. You know what I mean? I think with raid design, they're so creative, it's almost to a detriment. Like the fight where you're dancing, or it's like... Do you guys understand the point I'm saying? It feels too almost like gimmicky almost.
To the Illidan fight, in Blackwing Temple. So Flamelash tactics are pretty simple. Every single raid member has a stacking debuff on them which does more and more fire damage as time goes on. When that debuff stacks too high on the tanks, they do a very simple tank swap. When it stacks too high on a melee, they walk around the corner, sit there for like a few seconds and then go back on the boss, and that is literally it. So let's compare this to the tactics for Illidan. Every 30 seconds a random raid member gets a debuff. They have to walk out the raid with a mage so that the mage can quickly Ice Nova and nuke the ads that spawn up from that debuff. In phase 2, the raid has to split into 3 groups to deal with the Flames of Aznath, which is considered one of the hardest parts of the encounter. Tanks have to kite the ads around in a specific path. Melee have to dodge these I-beams coming from Illidan, and then a random raid member will get barraged by this ability called Dark Barrage. It has to be spam healed. Then in phase 3, Illidan starts to swap between various different phases just to make it even more difficult. A Warlock with max shadow resistance gear will have to tank him, more demons spawn, and then Illidan has to be kited into Maiev Shadow Song's traps to increase the damage that he takes. It's a 16-minute long fight. It's very, very complex compared to the average mechanics from Classic WoW.
Illidan is actually really fucking easy. Like, Illidan is one of the easiest fights in TBC. Like, it's a long fight, right? But mechanically, dude, Illidan is fucking easy, man. It was almost like disappointing to do back in TBC because it was so easy.
Fair enough, it is kind of unfair to compare Illidan to one of the more simpler fights from Blackwing Lair, but nonetheless, even if we compared this against Nefarian or like AQ bosses, the mechanics on every single boss in Classic WoW is fairly limited compared to the Burning Crusade, and even like filler bosses between the big bosses in like Burning Crusade bosses had a fair amount of mechanics for you to deal with. Overall, there simply was a lot more complexity to the Burning Crusade's raid design. The third point I want to make is more viable specs. I have recently made a video about this which has a detailed look into each and every kind of meme spec from Classic WoW and how it suddenly became very viable during the Burning Crusade, if you want to look at that video later on. But what essentially happened was all the hybrid classes became more support classes. They still would do less DPS, but they'd make up for that by buffing the raid with totems or regenerating mana with Vampiric Touch, and some specs even provided very, very useful debuffs that would buff the DPS of the raid as well. More tanking specs became viable, so you wouldn't just see the Protection Warrior all the time, because obviously that gets a little bit boring. Protection Paladin became a really awesome AoE tank. They had their mana issues fixed with a simple talent.
If you are a warrior main, in Classic Vanilla WoW, are you disappointed that the warrior tanking meta is dual wield or dual like two? What is the word I'm like? My brain is giving out. Dual wield. Yeah. Are you disappointed that the meta is Fury Prot dual wield? To me, like I don't play warrior, but when I think of warrior, like I want to have a shield. I want to feel fucking tanky. I would want to like have that immersion in the role. And having two swords or two dual-wielding weapons, to me, that feels stupid, right? In TBC, I know. In TBC, you wear a shield, right? But in Classic, to me, that's kind of off-putting as a tank. If I was going to tank, I wouldn't like that.
Which allowed them to regenerate their mana based on the amount that they would get healed. You also had feral tanks, which became more viable because they just became a huge meat bag that was able to soak loads and loads of damage. Elemental Shamans became very, very useful to any ranged DPS group because they can massively boost the DPS of that group with abilities like Bloodlust, and so on and so forth. Our fourth point is gemming, which is a very simple change, but it allowed you to customize your gear and added a level of strategy involved with optimizing your character, which was a pretty welcome addition in my opinion. It added a level of thinking and theory crafting to the gearing process, and overall just made it a little bit more interesting. There's something just very satisfying about there being a number of different step-to-step processes of improving your character. For number 5, we have an improved PvP system. So in vanilla, the PvP system rewarded you ranks and gear based on how much time you spent playing the game. If you were able to farm 16 to 21 hours per day for 3 months, then you get the top rank and you get the best gear. Whereas in the Burning Crusade, PvP...
The age-old question. What percent of Classic WoW rank 14s will get Gladiator in TBC? 100%? Are they all Gladiator players? 50%? 0? You think 0? No, like maybe 5%, right? There's some good PvPers that did it. 1. It'll be 1 to 5. 1 to 5%. 69? Nice. I'll leave it there.
gear was rewarded for you an actual skill level in the arena in a MMR and rating system. You actually had to test your skill in a specialist environment against other players, which provided very exciting and competitive gameplay. The honor system was totally reworked to just be a point system that you could farm in Battlegrounds in order to get you some fairly decent gear. Unfortunately, this did make Battlegrounds largely irrelevant in a Burning Crusade, but nonetheless I'm going to talk about that
Well, you have to do
more
them
in
still
a
for the
different
marks.
video. For
You
my
always have
sixth
to.
point, I have quest hubs. Vanilla had quests that led you to everywhere across the entire world, which meant that you were basically playing the walking simulator a lot of the time. This was a blessing and a curse because obviously it encouraged you to go out into the world and do some exploration, but after a while it kinda got a little bit tedious. And because you were jumping zones so often, each zone themselves also felt a little bit skimpy when it came to quests compared to the Burning Crusade. In the Burning Crusade, quests were more clumped together into areas, which means you explored each zone.
If I had a genie in a bottle, and I had one wish, if I had one wish, my wish would be to have a magic computer, right? I would sit here and at my computer with my modern day computer setup and my high-speed internet, my 3 monitors, my extreme, gaming PC, my computer would time travel me to 2004. So I'm sitting here playing on my hardware, but I log in to 2004 World of Warcraft. So I log in and I'm playing with other humans that are alive in 2004. And so I'm running around and I know everything I know. I know all the vanilla secrets. I would be a fucking gamer god. You literally would. I would own everyone in 2004. I would shit on them, dude. And I would be like, dude, I would know all the tactics. I would know everything. Dude, that would... Oh, that feels so good. That would be so fucking badass. It sounds like a sci-fi story. Yeah, true. It actually does.
At a steady...
Hey, that idea is patented, by the way. You are not allowed to distribute that. That is my idea. If you use that idea, I will come at you with a lawsuit, okay? That's my idea.
Aggressive rate.
Magic
and overall,
computer.
each and every zone had more depth, lore and immersion because there was simply more content within the zone, whereas classic WoW zones just simply had less content inside them. The zones were more tightly packed with content, which meant you spent more time in those zones, which meant you have an increased chance of making friends within that zone because there'd normally be a dungeon attached to that zone that you can go and do, and if you're lying around in that zone just watching the general chat, there were people looking for groups and stuff like that, and there were quests that were associated with those dungeons, obviously. So I think...
You said that was Swifty in 2004? Dude, imagine how much pussy Swifty slayed at BlizzCon 2005. Imagine, dude. Swifty was the original WoW Chad. Swifty fucking owns, dude. Swifty was the WoW Chad. That's true.
The zones in TBC just encourage you to be... Well, they encourage you to have a more social experience while you were leveling up. Whereas in vanilla, it may be harder for you to get a dungeon and to get some group content going because the dungeon you want to do is at the other side of the world and people just can't be bothered walking
Yeah, I actually blew him at BlizzCon. Nice one, dude.
of the way. For our 7th point, we have less irritating loot. So what I mean by this is
I
in vanilla,
blew Swifty in 2005
you got
at
Shaman
BlizzCon.
loot even when you played Alliance. And you could be in situations like my guild, for instance, where every single druid in my raid group is totally decked out in gear, so druids don't really need gear in my raid anymore. But last night, 2 Cenarian tier 2 headpieces dropped, so that just became boring, disenchanting loot. Obviously that can become very frustrating and, in all honesty, a little bit dull. In the Burning Crusade, they did things a little bit differently because they had tokens which essentially could be redeemed for tier pieces and it'd be shared between 3 different classes, which meant that there was more competition but less wasted loot. And obviously each spec for each class had its own tier set, which obviously made people who play less conventional specs much happier. For our 8th point, we have Heroic Dungeons. Now, Heroic Dungeons can be considered as a massive addition of content because I see it more as a cherry on the top to the original dungeons as they don't really change that much. They maybe change the mechanics.
No, dude, I remember in early TBC, each 25-man boss only dropped 2 tokens. If they're a tier boss, they drop 2 tokens. I think in late TBC, they buffed that to 3 tokens. So something like that, like something small like that, I hope if we get Classic TBC, they have the original kind of like drop rates, so we only get 2 tokens, stuff like that. I hope we get the original raids, the original loot tables. I hope that's what we get.
Slightly add a few bosses here and there, like secret bosses, but on the large part they are kind of the same, just significantly more difficult. Because of their increased difficulty, I honestly think some of the heroic dungeons are some of the best content you can ever experience in World of Warcraft. It's really no wonder why Mythic Plus dungeons right now in retail have become so popular, because what they've essentially done is keep the content relevant to a scaled up player base. Obviously when people get better gear, the dungeons become irrelevant, but the ability to go back into a dungeon and it still be difficult is...
Hot take, maybe you guys disagree. Infinitely scaling content is not fun relevant. Yes, it makes your content relevant insofar as the difficulty keeps going up with your player power as it goes up, but infinitely scaling content is not fun. Yes, it's relevant. It's not fun though.
Is quite fun. It's important to note that these heroic dungeons actually did require keys in order for you to unlock them, and they required massive rep grinds, which leads me on to a little bit of a bonus point, that the amount of achievements required for the Burning Crusade was extensive. To get into raids, to get into heroic dungeons, and pretty much all the content had a very long attunement path, which, as has been described in previous videos that I've watched, every time you logged into the Burning Crusade, you always had something to do because there was just so much to do. I mean, if you're in a situation...
This is the TBC attunement chart. This looks really bad. It's really not. Like, you just kind of do everything as you would naturally. Just like do the content and you'll get your attunements. It's not, this is just like, just go do the dungeons and you're gonna get attuned. It's not that bad. It's really not that bad. It's not too bad.
Into the Burning Crusade, you always had something to do because there was just so much to do. I mean, if you're in a situation like I am right now, I've cleared all the raids that I need to clear on Classic and I've pretty much got nothing to do. If I had cleared all the raids on the Burning Crusade, I would still have stuff to do because I could still go into heroic dungeons and farm emblems, which is my 9th point. You can very easily go without loot for about 2 months in vanilla, which has actually happened to me just fairly recently until I got Viscags, and it can be very boring and frustrating because your progression feels massively stalled by the fact you're just not getting any gear. But in Burning Crusade you had emblems, which means that, you know, you may not get any loot from the raid, but you're still farming a constant currency system which you can spend on gear, so it never feels like your progression as your character is stalled in any way, because you can farm these emblems to get a few gear pieces here and there.
And
the gear pieces that you can get from emblems were never like huge gear pieces. You still need to go out and do your raids in order to get the best gear available to your character, but you can still fill in your gear pieces a little bit with these emblem bonuses. Overall, it just meant that you could always constantly be doing something every time you logged in order to improve your character in some way, rather than just waiting another week for you to do a raid again. Last point I'm going to mention.
Well, I mean, okay, that's true for casuals. Still, though, if you're a min-max player in TBC, give it 2 months, you're going to have everything you want, and then you're raid logging. You're either raid logging it, doing the same shit over again on alts, or farming arena. So if you're a super sweaty guy, you're going to have the same issue as in vanilla. Like, you get everything done, and they're just kind of waiting for raid lockouts or playing alts. Same issue. But I think those 2 months... Hi, Dad. That 2 months of, like, initial gear acquisition is more fun in TBC than it is in Classic. I'll give it that. So if you want to do it over and over again on alts, and I'm going to do it on 3 characters or maybe even 4 characters, I like the progression system in TBC is really, really fun, satisfying. It's super fucking good, dude. Because not only do you have badges, you have normal dungeons, right? Look at this. Like, this is where you're getting your gear in TBC, okay? You have this. Big font, right? You have normal dungeons, okay? You have heroic dungeons, and this is like badges too, plus badges, okay? Plus you have reputations. There's a fuck ton of reputations that gives a really good gear, like really, really good gear. You have professions. Profession gear is really, really good gear. You have raids. You have BG gear. You have arena gear. You have what else? I guess I'll make it something. Badge gear. You have what else? You like. Dude, I guess, like, some quest gear is actually insane, too. Some quest gear is insane, too, actually. Quest gear, like, dude, TBC gearing is so fucking fun. So fucking fun. Give the dog the attention. There's a dog in here? Oh, there's a dog in here. Hi, Laika. Hi.
Hi, puppy. Hi.
You have a very wet nose this morning. Nice one. All right, chat. Let's keep playing the video, all right? Let's play the video.
Mention is Shamans and Paladins on each faction, so this is a very welcome addition, because to be honest I probably would have played Shaman if Alliance had access to a Shaman race. Obviously, it doesn't really make any sense at all for any of your Horde races in vanilla to be Paladins, or for any of the Alliance races to be a Shaman. So obviously you cannot like rewrite the lore, make the lore very weird in vanilla. I'm not saying that I have had that expectation of vanilla or anything like that, but nonetheless, I think it is pretty cool to, to have every single class available for each and every faction, because it just massively increases the class diversity
Guys, here's
for
the video.
each faction. But anyway.